The silent arrival, the sun fell softly over Tuscany that evening, wrapping the hills in a golden haze. It was the kind of light that made everything look perfect, the vines glowing, the guests laughing, and the air thick with the scent of roses and fresh bread. Ana De Armas's wedding to Tom Cruise was supposed to be that picture of perfection. Cameras waited outside the villa, reporters whispered, and fans online counted down to every moment. No one knew what was about to happen. The music started. Gentle strings, soft footsteps, the shimmer of laughter. Tom stood at the altar, smiling with calm confidence. Ana walked down the aisle, radiant, her dress floating like a whisper. But something stirred near the gates. The guard glanced at his list, confused. A man in a simple black suit, his hair tied loosely, was standing there with quiet eyes. Keanu Reeves. He wasn't supposed to be there. The guard hesitated, whispering to the coordinator, who almost dropped her headset. The guest list was full. There was no Keanu Reeves, yet he stood there, silent, calm, holding something small, a white envelope sealed with silver wax. No cameras followed him. No one even noticed him enter through the side garden. He walked with the stillness of someone not seeking attention, only meaning. Inside, the ceremony had begun. Ana's voice trembled slightly as she spoke her vows, her eyes shining. Tom smiled proudly, unaware that in the shadowed corridor beyond the hall, a familiar face was watching from a distance. Not out of jealousy, not out of pain, but something quieter, something deeper. Sandra Bullock arrived late, her car stopping at the entrance just as Keanu slipped inside. The world called them friends, but those who knew their story knew there was more. Not romance. Not history, but something harder to describe. Respect born of shared silence, of kindness exchanged without need for words. As she stepped out, her assistant whispered, "Sandra, you'll never believe who just came." Sandra froze. Keanu? Yes. But no one told him to come. The wedding music carried through the open doors. Sandra's heartbeat quickened. It had been years since she'd seen that familiar calmness. Those gentle eyes that always seemed to carry both pain and peace. She didn't know why he was here. No one did. But deep down, she felt there was a reason. Inside, Keanu sat quietly in the last row. He didn't look at the couple. He looked at the window instead, where sunlight painted long shadows across the floor. He held the envelope tight, his fingers trembling just slightly. A memory flashed. Years ago, on a movie set, Ana had told him, "One day, I'll find peace." Keanu had simply nodded and said, "When you do, send a letter. I'll come." She never sent the letter, so why was he here? The ceremony ended with applause and tears. Guests rushed forward with flowers, cameras clicked, and laughter filled the courtyard. Sandra stood near the entrance, watching Keanu from a distance. There was something haunting about the way he smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. When Ana turned and saw him, her breath caught. Tom followed her gaze, confused. Keanu raised a hand in quiet greeting. Ana walked toward him, her veil brushing the ground. "You came," she whispered. "I had to," Keanu said softly. "Someone once told me peace isn't something you wait for. It's something you walk toward." The crowd watched in silence. Even the music stopped. Cameras captured the moment, not the glitz. Not the glamour, but something raw and human. Then, before anyone could ask why he was there, Keanu placed the envelope in Ana's hand. "For you," he said. She opened it slowly, her fingers shaking. Inside was a folded letter written years ago, in her own handwriting. The same letter she had written during one of her darkest nights, one she thought she had burned long ago. How did he have it? Ana's eyes filled with tears. I threw this away." Keanu's voice was calm. "Some things don't want to be lost." Tom stood behind her, silent. Sandra, still by the doorway, felt her chest tighten. She knew that tone in Keanu's voice. It was the same one he used when he carried someone else's pain so they wouldn't have to. A breeze swept through the courtyard, scattering rose petals. The guests murmured, unsure what was happening. Keanu smiled faintly, gave a small bow to Ana and Tom, and turned to leave. But as he walked away, Ana called out, "Wait! Why did you come today?" He stopped, looked back, and said, "Because this is the day you finally forgave yourself." The courtyard fell silent. Keanu walked toward the exit, each step slow and deliberate. Cameras followed him, guests whispered, and social media erupted within minutes. Keanu at the wedding began trending, but the story wasn't about his arrival. It was about what came next. Sandra followed him quietly as he walked through the gardens. She didn't say a word until he stopped by the old olive tree near the gate. "You kept her letter?" she asked softly. Keanu nodded. She wrote it when she thought no one cared. "I found it years ago, tucked in an old script. She forgot she gave it to me. I thought maybe today she'd need to see who she used to be." Sandra's eyes glistened. "You always know when people need healing, don't you?" He smiled faintly. "Maybe because I've needed it too." The sound of laughter echoed from inside, the start of celebration, music returning. But out here, beneath the golden light, there was only stillness. Two old friends, bound by empathy, standing at the edge of a story that was far from over. Sandra looked at him for a long moment and said, "The internet's already going crazy, you know." Keanu chuckled softly. "They always do." Then, more quietly, he added, "But maybe for once, they'll talk about kindness instead of drama." She smiled, and for the first time in a long while, so did he. Neither of them knew that what Sandra would do next, a decision made in that quiet garden, would change everything. The letter that was never meant to return. The night after the wedding should have been full of laughter, music, and champagne toasts. Instead, there was a strange hush that settled over the Tuscan hills. Even as fireworks burst in the distance, people whispered about what had just happened. Guests scrolled through their phones, rewatching clips of Keanu handing Ana that envelope. Every angle was now online, every word being analyzed. But no one really understood what the letter meant, except Keanu, Ana, and perhaps Sandra, who followed him into the quiet garden. The sound of cicadas filled the air. Keanu stood by the old stone wall, the faint glow from the villa behind him. Sandra approached slowly, her heels crunching the gravel. He looked at her and smiled gently, as if expecting her to come. "You always show up. When the world gets loud," he said softly, "and you always walk into the storm when no one expects you to." She replied. The air between them felt heavy, but calm. Two souls who didn't need words to understand each other. Sandra had seen that look before, years ago, after one of his most difficult losses. It was the same mix of peace and quiet sorrow. "That letter," she asked finally. "Why now?" Keanu took a long breath, looking out at the distant hills. "She wrote it when she was filming that movie in Spain." She was struggling. She didn't tell anyone how much the pressure was breaking her. "She gave me that letter one night. Said it was something she never wanted to see again. I kept it because I knew one day she'd forget how strong she was." Sandra's voice softened. "And today was that day?" He nodded. You could see it in her eyes. She needed to remember she came from pain, not perfection. A gust of wind carried the faint echo of laughter from the villa. Inside, Tom was greeting guests, smiling for photos, pretending everything was normal. But behind that smile, he kept glancing toward the garden, toward the door where Ana had disappeared. She hadn't returned for nearly 20 minutes. He didn't know if he should interrupt or let her breathe. Meanwhile, Ana sat alone in a small side room, the letter open on her lap. Her hands shook as she read her own words written years ago, words she had once sworn no one would ever see. "Dear whoever finds this, I don't know if I'll make it. I don't know if fame is freedom or just a beautiful cage. I feel like I'm losing myself trying to be what everyone wants. But if I ever find peace, I hope it's because someone reminded me that being enough isn't about applause." Ana wiped her tears. She remembered that night clearly. The loneliness, the exhaustion, the quiet wish that someone would understand. She had given the letter to Keanu by accident, wrapped in a script she wanted him to review. He must have known. And yet, he never mentioned it. In that moment, she realized what kind of man he was, someone who didn't rescue people for attention, but because he couldn't bear to see anyone broken. Outside, Sandra watched him as he leaned against the wall, eyes distant. "You know," she said quietly, "most people would have turned that into a story. You just gave it back to her." Keanu smiled faintly. "Maybe because it never belonged to me. You think she'll tell Tom? Maybe not today. Maybe not ever. Some truths heal better in silence. The way he said it made Sandra look at him differently. She realized he wasn't just talking about Ana anymore. He was talking about himself, about the countless times he had carried other people's pain quietly, never asking for recognition. Inside the villa, the music picked up again. Guests returned to dancing, laughter filling the air. Ana finally emerged, her eyes still red but her smile genuine. Tom rushed to her side, asking if she was okay. She nodded, touching his arm softly. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steady. Better than fine. And for the first time, she meant it. But as the evening went on, a strange energy grew among the guests. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to rumors. Someone said Keanu had come to stop the wedding. Another claimed he was Ana's secret mentor. One blog even wrote that the letter was a proposal he had once written. By midnight, social media was flooded with wild theories. The letter, Keanu's truth, Ana and Keanu. Sandra sat by the fountain outside, scrolling through her phone, sighing at the madness. Keanu joined her, sitting on the cold marble edge. "They always make stories," she said. "Stories make people feel something," he replied. "Sometimes that's all they're looking for." She looked at him. "But doesn't it hurt? To be misunderstood over and over again?" He shrugged. "Maybe. But pain isn't the worst thing. Indifference is." The simplicity of his words hit her. She had spent years in Hollywood's noise, the lights, the gossip, the endless pretending. Yet in one line, he reminded her what mattered. Sandra glanced toward the glowing villa. "You think she'll be okay now?" "Yes," Keanu said softly. She finally faced herself. "That's all anyone can do." There was a long silence. The sky above them was full of stars, the kind that only show up far from cities. The air smelled of olive leaves and smoke from the torches. Then Sandra asked the question that had been sitting in her chest since she arrived. "And what about you, Keanu? Why do you keep showing up for everyone but yourself?" He smiled. That same quiet smile that never gave everything away. "Maybe I already had my piece. Maybe it just looks different than people expect." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, frowned slightly, and stood up. "Is everything okay?" Sandra asked. He nodded, though his expression said otherwise. "Someone I used to know. Just sent a message." "It's strange. After all these years," she hesitated. "You mean someone important?" Keanu didn't answer directly. "Someone who once saved me without knowing it." Then, without another word, he turned toward the exit. Sandra stood following him. "Where are you going?" "To return one more thing that was never mine." His voice was calm, but his eyes looked far away, like he was walking toward something he'd been avoiding for years. "Keanu," Sandra called after him. "You can't just disappear again." He stopped, looked back, and smiled gently. "Don't worry. Disappearing isn't always running away. Sometimes it's making space for others to shine." And just like that, he was gone, into the quiet Tuscan night, leaving behind only questions and whispers. Sandra stood there, watching the path he took. Her heart ached, not out of romance, but something deeper, admiration mixed with sadness. She knew this wasn't the end of the story. Not for him. Not for Ana. Not for herself. Inside, the music played on, the laughter louder than ever. But out in the dark, under the old olive tree, something unseen was beginning, a thread of kindness, forgiveness, and quiet courage that would soon reach far beyond that villa. And as Sandra turned back toward the lights, she whispered to herself, "Whatever he's walking toward, I hope he finally finds peace." But what she didn't know was that the message Keanu had just received, the one that made him leave, would lead them all into something none of them could have imagined. The message from the past, the Tuscan road, was quiet that night, lined with cypress trees that swayed gently in the warm wind. The moon hung low, glowing silver over the fields. Keanu walked alone, his shoes crunching on the gravel. The phone in his hand buzzed again, one message, then another. He stopped under a lamppost and opened it. The name made him freeze. Maria Ortega. He hadn't seen that name in years. The last time they spoke, it was in a hospital corridor. A moment of silence, a few words about loss, and a promise neither of them could keep. Maria was once a set nurse on a film he'd done in Mexico 15 years ago. Her kindness had saved him during one of the darkest weeks of his life, after he'd almost walked away from acting altogether. She had been the one to say, "You heal others because you don't know how to heal yourself." And now, her message said only one thing. She needs you. Come if you can. Below it, a picture. A young girl in a hospital bed. Tubes, pale skin, eyes that looked strangely familiar. Keanu stared at the photo, his breath catching. The girl's eyes. They looked like Maria's, but something about the smile, faint and patient, reminded him of someone else. He stood there for a long time before typing a reply. "Where are you?" Within seconds, the answer came. Florence, Children's Hospice, room 12. He slipped the phone into his pocket and started walking faster. Meanwhile, back at the villa, Sandra sat alone at the edge of the dance floor. The wedding was winding down, laughter turning to tired goodbyes. Ana and Tom had finally found peace in each other's arms. But Sandra's eyes kept drifting toward the road beyond the gate. Keanu was gone, and that unsettled her. She checked her phone. No message, no clue. But something deep inside told her this wasn't just another quiet disappearance. This was different. She stood up, walked to Ana, and whispered, "If you see Tom, tell him I had to go." "Go? Where?" Ana asked, concern flickering across her face. "I don't know yet," Sandra said softly. "But I think he does." In Florence, the hospice was bathed in soft yellow light. The corridors smelled faintly of lavender and disinfectant. Keanu walked past quiet rooms where families sat in hushed tones. Nurses recognized him instantly, but no one spoke his name aloud. There was something about the way he carried himself, calm, grounded, kind, that made people lower their voices in respect. Room 12. He stopped outside, hand on the doorknob, heart steady but heavy. When he stepped inside, Maria looked up. Her hair was streaked with gray now, her eyes tired but warm. She smiled faintly, tears forming the moment she saw him. "You came," she whispered. "You called," he replied gently. Her hand trembled as she gestured toward the bed. "She's been asking about you. She saw an old interview where you spoke about kindness," she said. "He talks like my mom used to." "She doesn't know who you are to me. I didn't want her to think her mother once saved a movie star." Keanu looked down at the small girl in the bed. She couldn't have been more than 9. Her breathing was shallow, her eyes half open. She looked fragile, yet peaceful. A sketchbook lay open beside her, drawings of stars, cities, and people holding hands. He knelt beside her bed. "Hi there," he said softly. The girl opened her eyes a little more. "You're the man from the movie. The one who helps people but doesn't talk much." Keanu smiled gently. "That sounds about right." "Mama said you were kind," she whispered. He looked at Maria, who smiled sadly. "What's your name?" Keanu asked the girl. "Isabella?" He nodded. "That's beautiful." She blinked slowly, her voice barely a whisper. "Are you here to make Mama smile again?" Maria turned away, tears in her eyes. Keanu reached out, brushing the girl's hair softly. "I think you already do that, Isabella," she smiled faintly. "Then maybe you can stay a little. Mama says stars don't stay forever, but I think some do." His throat tightened. "I can stay for a while," he said quietly. Back at the villa, Sandra was already on the road following her instinct. She didn't know where she was heading, only that her heart refused to let him disappear without reason. As her car moved through the night, she scrolled through her phone. No messages, no updates, until a headline caught her eye. "Keanu Reeves leaves Ana's wedding after emotional moment. Fans speculate reason behind sudden exit." She sighed. People online were already spinning theories, as always. But then she noticed something in one of the fan photos. Keanu's phone screen reflected faintly in the picture. Sandra zoomed in. Blurry letters, but one word stood out. Florence. That was enough. She turned her car toward the city. In room 12, time slowed. Maria and Keanu talked quietly as Isabella drifted in and out of sleep. Maria told him about her life after Mexico. The struggles, the hospital bills, the long nights. She never asked for help. She never reached out. "You once told me," Maria said softly, "that kindness doesn't need to be remembered. I tried to live by that. But sometimes, kindness is the only thing that keeps you alive." Keanu nodded, his eyes glistening. "And sometimes it's the only thing that makes life worth living." They sat in silence for a while. Then Isabella stirred, mumbling something. Keanu leaned closer. "What was that, little star?" "Tell me a story," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "About what?" "About someone who found peace." Keanu thought for a long moment. Then he began to tell her a story, not from a movie, but from his own heart. A story about a man who carried letters for others, who returned them when people forgot who they were. A man who believed that peace wasn't something you earned, but something you shared. Maria listened quietly, tears rolling down her cheeks. When he finished, Isabella was asleep, her breathing soft, steady. He looked at Maria. "She's strong," Maria nodded. "She gets that from people who never stopped believing in good." As dawn began to touch the horizon, Maria walked him to the door. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "I don't know if I'll see you again, but I needed her to see what real kindness looks like." He smiled gently. "You've shown her that every day." Then, before leaving, he pulled something from his pocket. A folded photo, old and worn. It was of Maria and her daughter at a beach, taken years ago. Maria gasped. "Where did you—" "You gave it to me when you thought you wouldn't make it," he said softly. "I kept it all this time. Now it's yours again." Maria covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. He placed the photo in her hand and said, "Peace doesn't always arrive. Sometimes we carry it for others until they're ready." As he turned to leave, Maria whispered, "You never stop walking, do you?" "Not while someone still needs to be found," he replied. When Sandra arrived in Florence, the morning sky was pale and full of mist. She found the hospice easily. By the time she reached the front steps, Keanu was already there, sitting on a bench outside, head bowed, eyes tired. She didn't speak at first. She just sat beside him. The silence said everything. After a while, she asked softly, "She's the one, isn't she?" "The reason you left?" He nodded slowly. "Her mother once helped me. Now it was my turn." Sandra looked toward the door, then back at him. "And the girl? She's brave. Stronger than most adults I've met." The two of them sat in quiet understanding. People walked past, nurses, visitors, families, but no one disturbed them. Finally, Sandra broke the silence. "You know, when people talk about you online, they say you're mysterious. That no one really knows you." Keanu smiled faintly. "Maybe that's because kindness doesn't trend as fast as rumors." She laughed softly. "You and your quiet wisdom." He looked at her. "You came all this way, Sandra." "Why?" Her voice trembled slightly. "Because every time you disappear, something beautiful happens. And I don't want to keep finding out through headlines." He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed her a folded note. "Then take this," she frowned. "What is it?" "Something I was supposed to give you years ago." Her hands shook as she unfolded it. The handwriting was his. Simple, honest, familiar. "You once told me that light doesn't ask to be seen. It just shines. If you ever forget that, read this. You are the light people look for." Her eyes filled with tears. "When did you write this?" "The day we finished that movie. I thought you'd left before I could say goodbye." Sandra wiped her eyes. "So all these years, you kept carrying letters for everyone else, and you had one for me too." Keanu smiled softly. "Some letters just need the right time." The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the hospice. Inside, Isabella was waking up, laughing faintly as Maria showed her the returned photo. Outside, Keanu and Sandra sat side by side, their silence now peaceful, the kind that comes after long storms. But unknown to them, someone had recorded the moment when he handed her that letter. By evening, it would spread across the internet. Millions would see it. People would argue, cry, and speculate. But they would also feel something they hadn't in a long time, because for once, the story wasn't about scandal or fame. It was about quiet kindness that spoke louder than any headline, and it was only the beginning of what was to come. When the world started watching, the morning after Florence woke to headlines that refused to fade. Every news outlet, every social feed, every trending page carried the same words. Keanu Reeves gives secret letter to Sandra Bullock at hospice. No one knew what the letter said. No one knew about Isabella. No one knew that kindness was the real story. The internet, hungry for meaning, spun its web of theories again. Is Keanu back with Sandra? Was the hospice visit part of a hidden project? Who is the child? But behind the noise, something strange began to happen. People started sharing their own letters, handwritten notes, lost messages, apologies that were never sent. The hashtag, letters, for peace began spreading quietly across countries, and all of it started from a blurry photo someone took outside that hospice. Sandra sat by the window of her hotel room, holding the original letter. Sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, warming the paper in her hands. She had read it a dozen times since that morning. Every word was simple, honest, and painfully human. You once told me that light doesn't ask to be seen. It just shines, she whispered those words to herself again. In all her years in Hollywood, awards, red carpets, interviews, she had never felt something so grounding. It wasn't love, not the way tabloids framed it. It was something harder to describe. Recognition between two souls who understood silence better than applause. Her phone buzzed. Hundreds of messages. Journalists asking for statements. Friends texting curious questions. Ana's message was the only one she opened. The videos everywhere. You and Keanu look like the world just stopped around you. Are you okay? Sandra replied, I'm fine. But I think the world needed this. She looked out the window again, wondering where Keanu was. He was still in Florence, though he hadn't told anyone. Instead of returning to the hotel or the airport, he had gone back to the hospice. Isabella had asked for another story. Maria had made coffee. For a moment, the world outside didn't exist. When he entered room 12 again, Isabella's face lit up. You came back, she said softly. I said I'd stay for a while, he replied with a gentle smile. Maria looked at him grateful. She slept better last night than she has in months. Stories do that, Keanu said quietly. They give the heart something to hold on to. Isabella handed him her sketchbook. Draw something for me? He hesitated. I'm not very good. Mama says you don't need to be good. You just need to be kind. He smiled faintly and took the pencil. On the blank page, he drew a small tree. Its roots deep, its branches wide, full of stars instead of leaves. Beneath it, he wrote one line. For every person who made someone else breathe easier today. When he handed it back, the girl studied it carefully. That's you, she whispered. No, he said softly. That's everyone who's ever cared. Maria placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder, her eyes glistening. She's been asking why you came back. I told her it's because good souls always find their way home. He didn't answer. He just smiled. That quiet kind of smile that carried both peace and sorrow. By afternoon, the world outside had grown louder. Reporters began gathering near the hospice gates. Fans left flowers, drawings, letters of gratitude. Some carried signs that read, "Kindness is still alive." The hospice director, overwhelmed, tried to keep the chaos outside, but it was too late. People had found something they didn't realize they were missing, proof that humility still existed. When Sandra arrived later that day, she saw the crowd and her heart sank. She hadn't wanted attention. She just wanted to see them again. Maria, Isabella, and Keanu. She slipped through the back entrance, escorted quietly by a nurse. In the hallway, she saw Keanu sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, looking tired but peaceful. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. You found me again, he said softly. I always do, she replied. They both laughed quietly, the kind of laughter that feels like a sigh. You've seen the news? He asked. It's everywhere, she said. But for once, people aren't fighting. They're writing to each other, thanking old friends, saying sorry. He looked surprised. Really? She nodded. Someone started a movement, Letters for Peace. People are leaving handwritten notes on park benches, at hospitals, at schools. Your small act started something. Keanu's expression softened. Then maybe the noise finally became music. Before he could say more, Maria stepped into the hallway. Her eyes were red, but she smiled. You two need to see something. She led them back into the room. Isabella was sitting up in bed, clutching the sketchbook. Beside her, the television was showing live footage. People across cities holding candles, reading letters aloud. A teacher in Brazil, a nurse in Japan, a bus driver in New York. Isabella turned to Keanu. They're telling stories too. He knelt beside her bed. Yes, they are. Because of you. He shook his head gently. Because of all of us? Maria wiped her tears. You see, Keanu? Kindness still spreads, even when it's quiet. But even as she spoke, a nurse entered the room, whispering something urgent in Italian. Maria's face changed. Her hands trembled. What is it? Sandra asked quickly. Maria turned to them, eyes wide. The hospice is closing. Donations stopped last month. They were supposed to shut it down after this week. Sandra froze. What? They said they can't afford to keep it open. The news might help for a few days, but after that, Keanu stood abruptly. How much do they need? Maria shook her head. Too much. Hundreds of thousands. It's been years of struggle. He paced the room, silent. Sandra could see his jaw tighten, not in anger, but in thought. After a moment, he said, Then we find a way. Sandra frowned. You mean, he nodded. We don't let it close. Keanu, that's... He interrupted gently. Do you know what would happen to the children here if this place shuts down? Sandra didn't answer. She didn't have to. Maria whispered, You can't fix everything. No, he said quietly. But I can try to fix this. That night, Keanu disappeared again. Sandra stayed with Maria and Isabella, unsure what he was planning. The next morning, she found out, a short video appeared on social media, posted from Keanu's official account, though he rarely used it. It wasn't polished or staged, just him, sitting on the same bench outside the hospice, speaking softly. I met someone who reminded me that small kindness can heal large pain. There's a place here in Florence that takes care of children like her. They're closing because kindness doesn't always pay bills. Maybe we can change that. If you have more than you need, give some to those who give everything. The video lasted less than a minute. No hashtags, no sponsorships, no drama, just honesty. Within hours, it reached millions. People began donating from every corner of the world. Fans, strangers, hospitals, schools, even other actors joined in quietly, without press releases. Ana and Tom sent a message of support, calling it the most human thing the internet has ever done. Within 3 days, the hospice not only reached its goal, it surpassed it tenfold. But amidst the celebration, something else happened that no one expected. Isabella asked to record a message too. Maria hesitated, but the doctors agreed. Keanu and Sandra helped her sit up, the sketchbook resting on her lap. She looked into the small camera with brave, clear eyes. Thank you, she said softly, for helping my home stay open. I don't know all your names, but I hope one day someone helps you too. Mama says kindness is like a tree. Even if you cut one branch, it grows again. Then she smiled. This is for the man who brought my mom her old photo back, and for the lady who made her laugh today. I love you both. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. Keanu looked away, unable to hide his emotion. That small video went viral too. In 24 hours, it became one of the most watched clips in the world. But for those who truly knew what it meant, Keanu, Sandra, Maria, it wasn't about fame. It was about the proof that gentle hearts could still move mountains. A week later, the hospice held a small celebration. Doctors, nurses, families, all smiling, laughing, crying. The courtyard was filled with candles, each representing a letter someone had sent. Sandra stood beside Keanu, watching the children play. You did this, she whispered. He shook his head. No, we did this. Everyone who remembered what it means to care. Maria joined them, holding Isabella's hand. She wants to give you something, she said. Isabella handed Keanu the sketchbook again. On the newest page, she had drawn a man and woman standing under a tree full of glowing letters. Beneath them, she had written, "Dear world, thank you for listening." Keanu knelt beside her, tears in his eyes. "This is beautiful, Isabella. Promise you'll keep telling stories?" she asked softly. He smiled. "I promise." The crowd clapped as candles flickered like stars. No red carpets, no applause from cameras, just quiet gratitude filling the night. Sandra looked at him, her voice trembling. "You always find a way to turn pain into light." He smiled faintly. "Maybe because I've spent a lifetime learning that light never stops trying." As the celebration went on, someone from the crowd whispered, "He didn't just save a hospice. He reminded the world that kindness still works." But even as hope filled the air, a new shadow appeared on the horizon. An anonymous message reached Keanu's email later that night. "You think you saved something, but you have no idea what really started that letter." He stared at the screen, confused, reading it again, and just like that, the quiet peace he had built began to tremble. Because the secret behind the letter was about to resurface, and it would change everything for them all. The secret behind the letter, the night after the celebration, was supposed to be calm. The air was filled with the scent of flowers, the faint echo of laughter, and the gentle hum of cicadas. The hospice lights glowed softly against the Tuscan dark, and everyone thought peace had finally settled in. But peace never stays long in stories like this. Inside his small hotel room, Keanu sat alone on the edge of his bed, the message still glowing on his phone screen. "You think you saved something, but you have no idea what really started that letter." He read it again. The words were simple, but they carried something sharp, something personal. He tried to trace the sender. No name, no number, only a strange email. silentleafmemorymail.com. His instinct told him not to ignore it. Not this time. He set his phone down and closed his eyes, replaying everything. The letter to Ana, the hospital visit, the sketchbook, the kindness that had gone viral. But somewhere, deep in the fog of memory, something stirred. A faint memory, old and unfinished. A woman's voice. The sound of rain against glass. A letter that was never meant to be read. His breathing slowed. The image became clearer. Years ago, during one of the hardest chapters of his life, he had written a letter to himself. One he never mailed. One he thought he had burned. It was meant to be a reminder that pain could be survived. But what if that letter hadn't been destroyed? What if it had been found and changed? He stood abruptly and went to the window. Outside, Florence glowed quietly. For the first time in days, he felt uneasy. He picked up his phone and typed a quick message to Sandra. "Meet me by the river tomorrow morning. There's something I need to understand." Sandra didn't sleep that night either. She sat in her room, scrolling through hundreds of posts under Danish letters for peace. People around the world were still writing. Children to their parents, strangers to strangers, nurses to patients. It was beautiful. It was healing. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in Keanu since the moment the donations stopped and the applause began. He had gone quiet again, too quiet. She read his message the next morning and left before sunrise. The air was cold, the sky pale. She found him standing by the Arno River looking at the water. He looked tired, not physically but emotionally, like someone who'd found too many memories all at once. "What happened?" she asked softly. He handed her his phone. "Someone sent this." She read the message, frowning. "What does it mean?" "I think," he said slowly, "it means the letter that started everything, the one I gave Ana, wasn't hers at all." Sandra stared at him. "What are you saying?" He looked down, his voice quiet. "I think it was mine." The world saw the letter as Ana's. Everyone thought it was her confession of pain, her lost words of healing. But now, standing by the river, Keanu began piecing together a truth he had long buried. 15 years earlier, after losing everything that mattered most, he had written a single letter. Not to anyone, not even to himself, but to the world he no longer understood. He had left it behind on a film set in Spain, tucked into a worn notebook. A few weeks later, Ana had worked on that same project. Somehow, that letter, raw, aching, unfinished, had reached her. She must have mistaken it for her own notes, written over it, added her thoughts, her pain, her fears. What he found years later and returned to her wasn't just her voice. It was theirs, intertwined. And now someone knew that. Sandra placed her hand on his arm. Does it matter who wrote it, Keanu? It helped her. It helped the world. He looked up, his eyes full of something heavy. It matters if someone wants to use it against her. She frowned. Against her? He nodded. Think about it. The timing, the attention, the money that came in. Someone's trying to twist what was pure. She stepped closer. Then we find out who. Later that day, they returned to the hospice. Maria noticed the worry in their faces. What's wrong? She asked. Keanu hesitated. Someone's trying to rewrite the story. Maria frowned. How? He showed her the email. She went pale. I've seen that address before. Where? Keanu asked quickly. When the hospice first started losing funds, Maria said slowly. We got messages from that same email, offering to buy the property. Anonymous. Cold. They wanted to turn it into a wellness resort. Sandra's eyes widened. So whoever this is, they tried to shut you down before. Now they're angry that you saved it. Keanu felt a chill run through him. And they're using the letter to make us look fake. Maria nodded slowly. People like that don't understand kindness. They only understand control. He took a deep breath. Then we show them kindness is stronger. But before he could say more, his phone buzzed again. Another message. This time, meet me in person. The truth belongs in the open. Attached was an address, an old art museum in central Florence. No name, no explanation. Sandra grabbed his arm. You're not going alone. He smiled faintly. I knew you'd say that. The museum was nearly empty when they arrived that afternoon. Dust floated in the sunlight, streaming through the tall windows. Echoes of footsteps followed them as they walked through the old marble halls. In the center of the gallery, a woman stood facing a painting, her long coat swaying slightly in the draft. When she turned, Keanu froze. It was Ana, Sandra gasped. Ana, what are you doing here? Ana's expression was unreadable. I could ask you the same thing. You got the same message? Keanu asked. She nodded. I thought maybe it was from you. Before any of them could speak again, a slow clap echoed across the hall. A man in a tailored suit stepped out from behind a column holding a tablet. He looked calm, confident, and far too pleased with himself. Good, he said softly. You all came. Keanu's voice was steady. Who are you? Just someone who appreciates truth, the man replied. He held up the tablet. I have the original copy of that letter. And guess what? It's not hers. He turned the screen toward them. Scanned handwriting appeared. Half of it Anna's, half clearly Keanu's. Sandra's heart pounded. You stole this? The man smirked. I prefer the word recovered. And the media will love it. Imagine the headline. The letter that fooled the world. A viral lie. The perfect story. Anna's voice trembled. Why would you do this? He shrugged. Because every movement needs a villain. And every hero needs a scandal. People love to build you up just to watch you fall. Keanu stepped forward, his tone calm but cutting. And what do you get out of it? Control, the man said simply. Attention, money. The hospice will close again, but this time you won't be able to save it. Keanu stared at him for a long moment, then said quietly, You think kindness is weak? But you're wrong, the man laughed. Kindness doesn't sell. Sandra stepped beside Keanu. Maybe not. But it lasts. Ana joined them, her voice steady now. And you'll never understand that. The man's smirk faltered. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He had been recording since they arrived. Thank you, he said softly. For showing your real story. The man's face drained of color. You wanted the truth in the open, Keanu said. Now it will be. Sandra took the tablet from his stunned hand, deleting the files before tossing it onto the marble floor. You can't hurt something built on honesty. Security arrived moments later, alerted by the noise. The man was escorted out, still shouting threats, but no one listened. That night, Keanu uploaded the full video. No editing, no commentary. Just raw truth, the confrontation, the confession, and the message that followed. His caption was short. The letter was never about who wrote it. It was about who needed it. The world did. The internet exploded again, but this time differently. People defended them fiercely. Kindness trended again, louder, stronger, clearer. The movement doubled overnight. Our Letters for Peace became a global project. Volunteers translated it into dozens of languages. Schools began teaching it. Hospitals shared it. Maria called him crying. "You didn't just save the hospice," she said. "You saved hope itself." A few days later, the three of them, Keanu, Sandra, and Ana, sat together in the garden outside the hospice. The children were playing. The air smelled of roses and rain. Ana broke the silence. "That letter, it saved me once. Now it saved all of us." Keanu nodded quietly. "It belonged to everyone who needed to remember they still mattered." Sandra smiled. "So maybe it was never yours or hers. Maybe it was the world's," Keanu said softly. They all laughed quietly, the tension finally breaking. For a moment, there was only peace, the kind that doesn't make noise, the kind that heals in silence. And though the world had turned their letter into a symbol, for them it was something simpler. Proof that when truth meets kindness, no lie can stand for long. But as the sun began to set, Keanu's phone buzzed again. He looked at it, and the faint smile on his face slowly faded. A new message appeared. "You stopped one lie, but there's another you still don't see." He stared at the words, feeling the world tilt again, because this time the secret wasn't about the letter. It was about someone much closer to him. The truth that waited in the dark. The night breeze over Florence carried the faint hum of the city. Distant bells, slow footsteps, the whisper of waves against the Arno River. The world was celebrating kindness, letters, and hope. But in Keanu's room, the glow from his phone told a different story. The message sat there like a shadow. "You stopped one lie, but there's another you still don't see." He read it again, his chest tightening. For a long time, he didn't move. The silence of the room pressed on him like weight. He thought it was over. He thought the letter, the hospice, the confrontation, all of it, had finally found peace. But the truth had a way of hiding beneath kindness, waiting until you were calm enough to face it. He took a deep breath, then typed back. "Who are you? What do you want?" The reply came instantly. "You already know. Check the letter again." He frowned, standing from the bed. On the table beside him lay a copy of the letter, the same one he had given Ana, the one that had healed the world. The pages were old, creased, full of words that belonged to both him and her. But as he looked closer now, under the dim light, something caught his eye. A faint line of writing hidden beneath the folds of the paper. He carefully unfolded it completely. And there it was, a single sentence written at the very bottom, faint, almost erased for the one who once carried me when I had nothing left. His breath caught. The handwriting wasn't his. It was Lakshmi's, his mother's. For a moment, the room blurred. He sank into the chair, his hands trembling as he held the page. The letter that started everything. The one that had healed Ana, inspired the world, saved the hospice, had come from a deeper place than anyone knew. It wasn't just his letter. It was something his mother had written years ago, during the hardest time of their lives. A letter she had slipped into his notebook the night he almost gave up. A letter that he had forgotten, lost, then accidentally passed forward, like a seed carried by the wind, finding new ground every time it fell. He sat there for a long while, unable to speak. Then quietly he whispered, "You never stopped saving me, Mom." The next morning, he went to the hospice garden. Sandra and Ana were already there, helping children with drawings. Maria sat under the olive tree, smiling faintly. Keanu looked pale but peaceful. Sandra noticed instantly. "What happened?" she asked softly. He held up the letter. "It wasn't just mine. Or Anna's?" Ana frowned. "Then whose?" He smiled gently, eyes glistening. "My mother's." They stared at him in silence. He continued, voice trembling but calm. "Years ago, after I lost everything, she left this in one of my notebooks. I never saw it. She didn't sign her name. She just wrote to remind me that even in darkness, kindness could still live. I must have carried it with me. Years later, it reached you, Ana. You added your words, your pain, your strength. And now it belongs to everyone. Sandra's eyes softened. So your mother started all of this? Keanu nodded. She started it with love. And I spent my life passing it forward without realizing it. Ana covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. Then maybe that's what kindness really is. Something that keeps walking through people even when they don't know who started it. Keanu looked at her, smiling faintly. Yes, like a letter that never stops traveling. A few hours later, the hospice held one final gathering. This time, it wasn't for cameras or news. It was for gratitude. The courtyard was decorated with paper letters hanging from strings, each one written by someone who had been touched by the movement. Sandra stood at the front, reading one aloud. Dear stranger, you reminded me that good people still exist. I held my father's hand today without anger for the first time in years. Thank you. The audience was quiet. Children clapped softly. Maria cried openly, her arms around Isabella. Then Keanu stepped forward. He wasn't holding a script or paper, only the letter, now folded carefully and tied with a small red ribbon. He said quietly, "We spent weeks trying to find out who wrote this. We searched for truth in names, in proof, in handwriting. But what if the truth was never about that? Maybe it's not about who wrote the words. Maybe it's about who needed them most." His voice shook slightly. "My mother once told me something I didn't understand then." She said, "Some letters never belong to one person. They belong to the world." I think this was one of those. The crowd listened, completely silent. He looked toward Maria and Isabella. This hospice will stay open, not because of one person, but because thousands decided to be kind at the same time. And maybe that's what saves the world. Not big gestures, but 1,000 small ones that meet in the middle. He paused, looking at the letter again. "So I think it's time to let this go." He turned toward the children. "Would you help me with something?" They gathered around him, curious. Together, they walked to the river at the edge of the garden. The sun was setting, turning the water gold. Keanu knelt, holding the letter gently in both hands. "This has traveled enough," he said softly. "It's time it rests." He placed it on the water's surface. The paper floated for a moment, then drifted slowly downstream, glowing in the orange light. The children clapped softly. Sandra whispered, "What happens now?" He smiled. "It finds someone else who needs it." That night, the sky over Florence turned a deep shade of violet. Lights from the city shimmered like fireflies. Maria, Sandra, Ana, and the children gathered on the terrace for one last dinner together. Laughter replaced pain. Stories replaced silence. Sandra leaned toward Keanu and said, "You realize what you did, right? You turned a forgotten letter into a movement that might change how people see the world." He shook his head with a gentle smile. "No, we just reminded people what they already knew, that being kind is the only thing that never gets old." Isabella, sitting beside him, tugged on his sleeve. "Will you tell me one more story before you go?" He smiled down at her. "Okay. What kind of story?" She thought for a moment, then said, "One where everyone finds peace at the end." He looked out toward the stars, his eyes soft. "I think that story already happened." The laughter around them faded into a warm quiet. The world outside still buzzed, but here, under the Florentine sky, peace finally arrived. Not the kind that comes from winning, but the kind that grows from understanding. A few weeks later, long after they had all gone home, a fisherman in another town found a piece of paper tangled near his boat. It was water-stained, almost unreadable, but a few words remained visible. "For the one who once carried me when I had nothing left." He dried it carefully, smiled without knowing why, and tucked it into his jacket pocket. And just like that, the letter began its journey again. Silent, timeless, unclaimed, but still alive. Because some stories never end. They just keep passing through new hearts, reminding each person who finds them that kindness once written never fades.